Just do get it done.
Would you like a fresco?
Sorry, Petit V, it's not a game now. We need a real captain.
In 2019, the boys released their first season, showing us a gritty and darkly humorous world where the superheroes are image-obsessed, power-hungry narcissists, and the good guys are a bunch of misfits of varying morality, constantly on the back foot and struggling to take down the company that allows the supes free reign to do what they want, with some good writing, themes, and world building. And then season 2 came along and literally everything I just said was thrown out the fucking window for a bunch of incoherent nonsense. It's when the politics started to infest the show's structure, and the good guys manage to win when something random just happens that allows them to take down the season's big bad, while Homelander gets away with everything. Now, there could be many different reasons as to why the show could have gone downhill, but if you have your conspiracy hat on, I would say that the main reason is that George Mistras left after season 1. George is an executive producer who has helped make some terrific shows. I believe it was his influence that helped to create the high points of season 1, and since then the show has declined and failed to reach the same heights since. My previous review was less structured and detailed, just giving a general overview of the characters, world building and themes. From this point on, due to the sheer amount of incoherent nonsense this season begins to spew, as well as the varying plot points which will become apparent in the later seasons, I will be going episode by episode in order to show exactly how many problems this season has. But before we move on to the rest of the video, I want to give a big shout out to today's sponsor, Sleep. Obviously sleep is important, but different people get to sleep very differently. For me personally, it's a bit of a struggle just trying to finally get to sleep, which is why I'm happy to promote Sleep. They offer a wider range of sleep masks, so if you're just someone who needs to block out the light, you're going to find something very easily. But if you're someone who needs something very niche, they've got that as well, having a wider range of different materials and textures for you to choose from. On top of that, they also have additional accessories to help your eyes. For me personally, I've been using the cooling pads as they help with my hay fever. So if you're looking to get some sleeping accessories, feel free to check out their website. I will leave a link in the description and in the video, and feel free to use code LUMA to get some percentage off. And without further ado, let's get onto the video. The first episode opens with the government members talking to Stan Edgar, the head of Vought, about the military contract and how the supes will fit into it. When asked who will command the supes, we get this.
Same person as always. Me.
What a fucking stupid answer this is, especially for a character who's supposed to be smart enough to run Vought. Every soldier needs someone in charge who's able to guide them on missions and what directives to follow. Assuming the goal is to have supes be running missions constantly, the military is expected to phone Stan up constantly to ask how they want the supe in the field to proceed with missions? That's just utter nonsense. We then see Black Noir infiltrate the base of the Syrian terrorist that was teased last season, and proceeds to kill him before leaving. Seems a bit pointless to build him up in the last season only to just casually kill him off, but whatever. We then get Translucent's funeral, which is pretty funny, I'll admit. Just the idea of someone giving a eulogy and singing to an empty coffin that people think has someone in it, as well as Deep being more annoyed about being cropped out of a photo than his teammate's farewell, is comedically tragic. Moving on, we see how both Huey and Starlight are miserable despite their different circumstances, with her living a luxurious life in a penthouse and him in a grimy basement owned by a drug cartel, before the two meet up to discuss their next plan together. And overall, it's a good scene, showing how they still want to be together despite some underlying resentment. We see the Deep continue to break down over what his life has become, being arrested and then bailed out by Eagle the Archer. And then we get the first proper scene of the boys interacting with each other, frustrated at their current situation and trying to come up with a plan to get out of it. And it's just so frustrating to watch because they act like everything that happened at the final episode of season 1 and all the character development that came with it just didn't happen. By the end of season 1, Butcher left everyone to die for his own selfish gains, while Huey showed himself to be cunning, reliable and able to fight to protect his new allies, who come to respect and support him for helping them escape. Meanwhile, in this scene, Frenchie and MM constantly berate Huey, with Frenchie even wanting Butcher to come back and lead them despite the fact he left them to die in the first place. And Huey just sort of splutters around with absolutely no respect given to him whatsoever. All of this is done so that by the end of the episode, Butcher can come back and lead them again, despite the fact that that makes no sense and completely negates Huey's character development from the first season. It would have been understandable if Huey had made them fugitives, but that was a group effort, and in fact the only reason these three didn't get tortured and killed is because of Huey. Yet they act like they escaped all by themselves and that he's just been a burden to them.
Shut the fuck up!
The writers also just make them act like complete idiots for the sake of pushing the plot forward or having comedic or high tense moments. For instance, Huey might be mild-mannered, but he can have a clear conversation with people, hence why he can work in customer service. So you'd think here, when he's trying to explain that he's been in contact with Annie, that he would immediately clarify that he's been using a burner phone to avoid being tracked. But no, he just tells them that he texted her using his phone, and it takes nearly knocking him out for him to clarify that he used a burner phone, when that should have been one of the first details he gave them. We then get a small scene I quite like, with Homelander going around Stillwell's old office, remorsefully looking at the old photos of him with her, and then stealing the last of her breast milk in the fridge and drinking it, giving us a scene showing some emotional depth to Homelander before cutting to a sickening character quirk of his. Ashley then enters the room, having been given Stillwell's position after Homelander recommended her, and she talks about a possible new recruit for the Seven, Blindspot, which quickly turns out to be a bad idea when Homelander kills him and informs her that she's just a puppet piece to him, and that any decisions that she make will be his decisions and she will be his spy in management. Now, overall this is a good scene, showing a good variety of tension, dark comedy and drama, but I really don't think this scene should have existed at all. The Seven are designed to be the best of the best, not just in terms of marketing appeal, but also in terms of power and ability. Pretty much all of the Seven are shown to be highly durable, with A-Train, Translucent, The Deep and Starlight all being shown to have their own personal gimmicks to make them useful or powerful. Maeve and Black Noir are shown to be extremely strong and capable fighters, and Homelander is a powerhouse with lasers who can fly. Meanwhile, Blindspot is, what, basically a regular human with some advanced combat training? Why on earth would he ever be a candidate for the Seven? I know Ashley isn't as capable as Stillwell, but season 1 showed she's not a complete fucking idiot, so I don't know why they made her one in her opening scene in this season. We see Starlight tracking down the target Huey gave her, and it's a pretty decent scene. I especially like the animation used when Gecko regrows his arm, seeing all the bone and muscle and veins start to grow back. It's pretty good, with plenty of absurdist humour as well.
For an extra grand, I'll let you chop off my dick.
We then cut back to the boys in the basement. Remember how MM talked to Huey because he didn't have a concrete plan to make them not wanted criminals? Well, here he's just making a fucking doll's house instead of doing anything productive whatsoever. One of the cartel members comes back with a injured colleague, and it's discovered that the cartel they're living with has been smuggling people across the borders. And one of the immigrants turned out to be a super terrorist with telekinetic powers. Why he would waste time lifting and throwing the boat instead of just throwing this dude is a bit weird, but at least we know he's pretty strong with his telekinetic abilities. We get a brief scene of Homelander ruling over Ashley when she's doing some PR, and then it cuts to the Deep in Eagle's apartment, with him and his handler trying to get Deep to join their organisation, which they say can get him back into the Seven. It then cuts to another scene of the boys treating Huey like a dickhead despite the fact that none of them are doing anything except sitting in a basement doing mundane shit. They also somehow have the ability to call Butcher, even though I have no idea how they would be able to do that since they lost all of their equipment. They don't really use their phones and they have no idea where Butcher is, and Butcher presumably doesn't know where they are either. Huey asks if they can get in contact with Rayna, as she is already sympathetic towards them and would be especially interested in a possible soup terrorist running around. And to that I say, why are you just going for her help now? She was already helping you even before you became wanted at the end of the last season. Why wouldn't you have contacted her for help? Or you could have even gone to see Mallerie. These guys have only thought about contacting and using these people now. Annie meets Gecko in a diner, and it's revealed that they used to go to Bible camp together. She asks him to steal some Compound V from the lab he works at, threatening to release the video she took of his side gig. And we also see Vought shooting a commercial for the soups in the military, only for rage and hilarity to ensue when it's discovered that Stormfront has been placed in the Seven by Stan Edgar, completely ignoring Homelander's opinion. The boys meet up with Rayna and inform her that a terrorist soup was smuggled into the country, and as Rayna begins to talk to them about what she thinks is going on, her head explodes, with the boys fleeing from the scene in terror. How does she die here? Now, we know it's Newman that killed her, presumably to further her goal of infiltrating the non-soup side of the government and taking control. but you can't see her anywhere around here. So can she really just explode people's heads from any distance as long as she can see them? How would Newman even know to come here in the first place? Why wouldn't she bother trying to kill the boys as well, considering they're responsible for killing Translucent and have been giving the government information that links Vought to Compound V and the creation of super terrorists, something that Stan would want to keep under wraps at all costs. This scene works here on first watch because we don't know anything and it ramps up the drama of who the head popper is. But looking back at it, this scene just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. We then get a scene of Homelander meeting with Stan to demand answers as to why he wasn't informed of Stormfront's hiring, and threatening to leave Vought, only for Stan to show no fear of him and giving him a verbal lashing in return.
I don't have to consult you about Stormfront or anything else.
This is a solid scene, and helps to solidify the character of Stan Edgar as someone who's not only capable of being charming and well spoken, but also extremely blunt and fearless even against someone as powerful as Homelander. We then get a quick scene of Homelander arriving to see Becca and Ryan, before cutting to the boys, where MM continues to blame Huey for their situation getting worse, despite the fact that literally none of them had any idea that what happened was going to happen. Annie phones Huey, and despite the drastic means that they have taken to show us that they're trying to remain unnoticed and not give themselves away in any possible way, Annie proceeds to very explicitly state over the phone that she is getting Compound V and is going to release it. And before anyone comes at me with they use the burner phone bollocks, that's still a phone that can be monitored, recorded and tracked. It doesn't happen, but it's still an incredibly stupid thing to just spew out when anyone could be listening. We get a nice little emotional moment between Huey and Annie before one of the cartel members is kicked down the stairs, with Butcher having returned after Frenchie phoned him. Again, ignoring how any of them would be able to get in contact with him and vice versa, absolutely none of them except Huey are angry at him for anything that happened in season 1. And even then, it seems that Huey is more annoyed at being constantly undermined and compared to Butcher than anything that happened in the final episode. You could have removed them being captured as a plot point and nothing would have changed. MM nearly took Frenchie's head off because he accidentally got Mallory's grandchildren killed, and nearly punched Huey out for not having a magic solution to fix their situation. But when face to face with a guy who endangered his family and then left him to be captured and tortured to death, he's just... Oh, but don't worry, Butcher says,
Daddy's home.
So I guess the writers completely fucking their own story up the arse without lube is excusable then. We open the next episode with Butcher getting dumped in a parking lot and then desperately struggling to write down what he can remember about Becca and her location, only to see on the news that he's a wanted man. It then cuts to the present and we get another scene of the writers making Butcher the most loved man ever, while Huey gets treated like shit. We then have a few small subplots all happening at once for the rest of the episode. And we see that the Deep is struggling in his therapy with the cult he's trying to join, the Church of the Collective. And after taking some magic mushroom tea, begins to hallucinate his gills are talking to him, causing him to come to terms with the fact that he demeans and uses women out of fear that they're being repulsed by him when he shows his true self. And he no longer feels repulsed by his gills anymore. I want to be very clear about something right now. This is the last time we see Deep have any actual character growth or development. And not only does he only have one other plot point in this entire season, but for the rest of the series he mostly just gets used for jokes, and he just completely reverts back to his base character, which I think is a shame because it would have been interesting seeing him mature and grow in a similar way to how A-Train does, but instead they just make him a mindless moron who gets scammed by the church, fucks fish and then gets his ass kicked constantly, basically just becoming a generic mook for Homelander to use. We then see Homelander at Becca's house playing with Ryan, where it's established that Homelander has no intentions of leaving her alone, and as he searches their house she goes to the end of the neighbourhood, showing that the entire estate is a Vought facility, with Becca asking them why they're letting Homelander near her. They reveal they don't want to upset Homelander any further, and so will not be interfering with the situation until he gets bored and moved on, a situation that is unlikely to happen due to his emotional issues. He talks to Ryan and states that he doesn't want Ryan to grow up without both his parents in his life because he doesn't want Ryan to feel the same pain he felt, encourages him to try and embrace the powers he has over ordinary people. As Becca tells him to leave, Homelander points out that this facade can only last for so long, and that eventually she'll have to tell him that the neighbourhood is one big lie. I quite like this subplot. It shows how emotionally starved he is as a person, desperately playing up his importance and demanding affection from a child he barely even even knows. And I also like the parallels he draws between the two of them, with Ryan still being brought up in some cage like he was, and that he'll turn out like him if he doesn't have some sense of normality in his life. Moving on, we see Annie promoting the introduction of Stormfront to the Seven, and Maeve needing to leave to deal with an emergency, with her going to see her ex-girlfriend Elena after a surgery, while Annie and Stormfront finish their interview sessions, with it providing commentary on the fact that female superheroes are more sexualized and refuse to add practical applications such as pockets to their uniforms in order to sexualize them more. It's a okay bit of commentary, and it helps to make Stormfront seem friendly and understandable, something that will be disproven in the following episodes. As the interviews continue, A-Train reappears, having apparently healed from his heart attack, with him and Annie having a tense standoff over whether he talked about how she helped Huey escape the night his heart attack happened. When Annie tries to talk to Stormfront, Gecko just shows up in the middle of a press release party and blatantly just gives her a sample of Compound V. Like, this was the best plan you came up with so you both don't get caught. Go to a massive party and just hand it out where everyone can see you. And as it turns out, in front of your boss as well. As A-Train appears and tries to search her, we see Annie put the case in Stormfront's bag and head off to continue her interviews. As Maeve explains that she kept her ex away from her because she was scared that Homelander would do something if he found out they were in a relationship, Annie has a talk with Stormfront about not being a Vought sellout, being encouraged to not take shit from anyone, and Annie manages to get the pack back from Stormfront's bag. How Stormfront didn't notice a giant case weighing her bag down, or the lid being lifted when Annie took it back is a bit of a stretch, but I could excuse it that she's just tired. In her apartment, A-Train confronts her about who she's texting and finds the V, only for her to say he won't do anything, as she saw Popclaw's autopsy report and that the death couldn't have been a suicide, with her threatening to reveal this to the world before taking the V back. And this works somehow. Okay, so the world would know it wasn't a suicide. So what? There's no link to A-Train, their relationship was a secret, so this threat has no water because A-Train wouldn't be affected by Popclaw's true death being revealed to anyone. Yet he decides to just give it back for absolutely no reason whatsoever. The final plot is Butcher surprising Mallerie outside of Rayna's funeral to try and get her into helping find the superpowered terrorists that were smuggled in, with Mallerie offering to try and talk to the CIA and get them some help if they bring in the soup terrorist, giving Butcher the address of where the money used to smuggle him in was transferred from. Of course, despite Huey pointing out that Butcher lies to them all the time, no one else has any problems with just believing him, and we get another jab at Huey being useless without Butcher. The boys go to the address and discover that the terrorist actually belongs to the same terrorist group that Kimiko was abducted into, the Shining Light Liberation Army. Kimiko and the terrorist see each other and after a tense standoff hug each other, revealing that he is her brother, Kenji. Despite Huey telling Butcher this, Butcher still tries to kill him, only for Huey to tackle him out the way, Kenji to use his powers on them, and then he runs away with Kimiko. After the boys refuse to harm Kenji, viewing Kimiko as one of them, Butcher tells them he needs to bring Kenji to Mallerie in order to try and find Becca, showing a brief moment of honesty to the group that wins them over to helping him. Kimiko and Kenji talk, with both apologising for being unable to find each other after she was taken and experimented on. But despite attempting to get him to join the boys or even just run away with her, he reveals that the village was destroyed by one of the soup sent by the US military, with him now fully believing in the Shining Light's cause despite everything that happened to the both of them. The two fight and chase each other, with it mostly being decent right up until Kenji decides to just stand in the street and do absolutely nothing, allowing Kimiko to knock him out and the boys to capture him. Butcher punches Huey before threatening to kill him if he ever jeopardizes his plan of getting Becca back, with none of the boys giving a shit about Huey once again. On to episode 3, and Butcher tries to apologise to Huey, only for Huey to pathetically attempt to punch him several times, because on top of neutering him socially and tactically, they have to turn him into a wimp that can't throw a basic punch. Butcher phones Mallerie and informs her of the situation, and despite being on a small boat with an open door, he says that he'll kill Kimiko if she tries to help Kenji escape, only to turn around and surprise surprise, there's Frenchie there listening to him. Almost like the writers wanted to throw in some drama and made Butcher forget how to be discreet when talking on the phone. Kimiko talks to her brother but is unable to trust him or let him go. We see that A-Train is having chest pains and that Becca is struggling due to the influence that Homelander is bringing into the household. We cut to a pitch meeting about a upcoming movie about the Seven, where Stormfront begins tearing the script apart and making commentary on the shallow attempts of putting female superheroes in the movie, before cutting to the news revealing that Compound V is responsible for superheroes being made, showing that Annie and Huey Huey's plan to leak it worked, and we see the reaction of different soups after learning the news. And Frenchie also celebrate the news, and we finally see the writers remember that the season 1 finale exists, and so Huey gets the respect he should have had in the previous 2 episodes, and he once again manages to stand up for himself without sputtering or flinching when Butcher doesn't give him the respect for leaking Compound V. It then cuts to a comedically dark scene of Homelander trying to teach Ryan to fly, which I'm not gonna lie is probably one of the funniest jokes this show has.
You called me Dad.
As Homelander tries to chastise Becca on how she raised Ryan, Ryan shoves him away, finally beginning to show his soup side when his emotions come out. Frenchie tries to get Kenji to teach him the sign language he uses to talk to Kimiko, but Kenji refuses, and then uses a energy drink to cut himself out of his binds, which is literally just duct tape. You'd think they'd include some zip ties or some really thick gloves on top of that so he has less mobility in his hands, but I guess not. As Homelander finally finds out the news about the Compound V leak, the police stumble upon the boat the boys are on, and when attempting to bluff them, Kenji appears, destroying the police helicopter and causing them to go on the run. The Deep is also encouraged to go back into the field by the leader of the church, Alistair, who can apparently get him back into the Seven. Mallerie informs Butcher they need to bring Kenji to a safe house for their deal, and we then see Huey, despite knowing how much he gets monitored, deciding to leave several incriminating voice messages for Starlight that would have got her killed if Vought ever found out. It's been less than a day since the news got released and every member of Vought, including her, are most likely being watched and attended meetings for damage control, which we see next. I don't know why he would jump to the worst and get panicked when they've already worked perfectly so far. I get that he's been stressed as well, but the worst part is done. They've managed to release the V into the world. At a 7 meeting, Stan encourages them to try and take down Kenji, as it will help give positive press and get people distracted from the Compound V issue. And after a deluded, heartfelt speech from Homelander, Stormfront begins to show attraction to him once he stands up against Vought and Stan. Deep then begins to attack the boys, causing them to evacuate in a speedboat. How exactly Deep knew how to get here when he wouldn't have had any resources to help him find them, and the fact that a few minutes ago he was in Ohio, which is about 8 hours away, comes across as extremely contrived. Deep also chooses to force his whale to land in front of the storm drain they're fleeing to, despite the fact that he could have just tipped them over and then captured them safely. On top of this, we know that Deep hears the pain that sea life goes through and it's very much disturbing to him. Yet for some reason, out of all the ways he could have done this, he decided to beach the whale, something that would cause it extreme pain and anxiety from being out the water. It's difficult to even frame this as the Deep fucking up like he usually does, and more the case of the writers forgetting about literally something they wrote 2 scenes ago for the sake of doing something cool happening in the episode.
It started when I was 9. I was at the mall. We passed the pet store, and I heard the goldfish begging for their lives. They were begging. And after that, the beach, the aquarium, Red Lobster.
One final point about the Deep is, how does he get knocked out so easily? He's shown to be extremely durable, apparently even managing to swim down to the Mariana Trench and survive the extreme pressure, and as we see in later seasons, is capable of taking some strong punishment from other soups. So how exactly does a small fall from the top of a whale knock him out? It's almost like they did this to give the boys an opportunity to escape, because if he stayed conscious, he might have delayed them until the 7 arrived and then the show would be over. Also, at the same time, you have this boat full of regular humans essentially hitting a brick wall of muscle and bone, flinging everyone around. Yet for some reason, no one is physically hurt. Kenji and Kimiko are soup, so I understand that, but the others are regular humans, and they go from like 60 miles an hour to nothing in a second, and they just stagger out like someone pushed them off a bike. As the boys begin to escape the whale, Huey snaps from the pressure and refuses to move. We then get a decent scene with with refusing to allow Huey to die, and so plays on Huey's desire to not get other people hurt and decides to stay in the whale until Huey leaves with him. And he later scolds Butcher over his treatment of the group and asking him to stick up for Huey as he needs it. There is one thing about this scene that bothers me though, and it's this line.
And you need that kid more than any one of us. He's your canary.
What canary?
You let your canary die? How you gonna know when you've gone too far?
See, it seems like the writers realised that seeing all these people playing off each other was one of the most interesting parts of the show, especially when it comes to how Huey, and Frenchie managed to get different reactions out of Butcher. But the thing about this line here is that Butcher already has gone too far and did so without a care in the world. Again, the writers might not remember, but the season 1 finale happened. He happily threw Frenchie and Kimiko to the wind, did not care at all that Huey would probably die trying to help them, and did all this for a pointless suicide side mission that ended up killing the wrong target, while Homelander was completely unaffected by it. So trying to act like Butcher is on the verge of crossing a line is nonsensical, because he already crossed it 4 episodes ago without hesitation. Outside, we get a few interesting interactions between the 7 members, with Deep trying to apologise to Annie about his treatment offer, Stormfront pushing against Homelander's authority and worming her way into a reasonable authority figure, and Homelander's views of Deep, seeing him as a disgusting but useful tool who he'll try and get back in someday. In the tunnels, we see A-Train struggling to run due to his damaged heart, something he is quick to hide from Homelander. Speaking of which, why is Homelander moving so slow? As stated at the end of my season 1 review, Homelander is shown to be extraordinarily fast, to the point where he is capable of moving someone engulfed in the light of an explosion out of harm's way before the explosion itself can kill them. So why does he just walk around slowly here? Why are they all just walking instead of running or flying? And why, when they're moving so slowly and with the boys having a head start on them, are they able to catch up to the boys so quickly? I can excuse this for Homelander and A-Train, as they're both able to cover great distances and Homelander has super hearing and X-ray vision. But it's Annie who finds them first, and all we see her do is slowly strut around the sewers with no idea which direction the boys have gone in, and she's still somehow able to find Huey first just to set up this scene here. So yes, the boys, despite knowing how much he's struggling, leave Huey at the back of the group, and what a surprise, he slows down and gets separated from them after about 15 seconds. And then he immediately starts trying to talk to Annie despite knowing that there's other supes hunting for him. After she knocks him down, Homelander appears from the opposite side of the sewer. If he's fast enough to reach the opposite side of the sewers, why doesn't he just use his speed and his hearing to hunt down the other boys members, who were only like 30 seconds in front of Huey? And in a minute, he doesn't even need to do that, considering they all decide to come back for Huey. But no, he can hear some random explosion from the opposite side of town, but can't hear boots hitting the floor right next to him apparently. Homelander demands that Annie kill Huey to prove her loyalty, threatening to kill the both of them if she doesn't. But before this can happen, Butcher steps in, allowing Kenji to bury Homelander. Kenji escapes, with Kimiko giving chase, and Butcher helps Huey to his feet, with the two beginning to mend their friendship. Stormfront manages to find Kimiko and Kenji somehow. I mean, she was in the sewers, don't know why she would be back here on the surface, but alright. She launches the duo into a nearby apartment building, throwing Kenji into the nearby hallway, killing the Black family, and then just casually walks past Kimiko without finishing her off. I get it, she wants to kill Kenji because he's the primary target, but she just threw Kimiko 20 feet in the air through a brick wall and she got back up to fight. Why the fuck wouldn't Stormfront finish her off when she's an obstacle in her way? Kimiko manages to stun her and the duo run onto the roof, with Stormfront wiping out entire apartments full of black people on the way to them. As Kenji jumps across the roof, Stormfront just randomly teleports behind Kimiko, forcing Kenji to come back for her and getting killed in the process. I don't know if it's a fuck up to do with the editing or what, but there's no build up to her being there, she just appears behind Kimiko. So after Stormfront brutally tortures Kenji to death, Homelander and Stormfront have a standoff over her disobeying him, allowing Kimiko to escape. As we see a help center providing aid to those affected in the apartment building fight, Stan makes a public statement that the creation of Compound V and its use to turn people into heroes was something conducted by Stillwell and some rogue scientists, something he had no knowledge of. Stan, what the fuck are you doing? The public have known about superheroes being active all the way since World War II. Soldier Boy is one of the most famous supes of all time. Stormfront has appeared throughout the centuries several times after changing her identity. And as seen in Season 3, there's several active superhero groups all in the public eye, even before the 21st century. Compound V very clearly isn't something made by Stillwell. This is absolute bollocks. And the fact that the show pretends that this is some genius move that actually works is astoundingly bad writing. I will say though, I do like how it parodies the idea of sending thoughts and prayers to people instead of just using their wealth to fix people's lives. And then Stan finishes off his statement by saying that people like Kenji are the reason why supes are more important now than ever. The episode ends with Stormfront being praised for killing Kenji, and Homelander silently glares at her for soaking up the attention. On to episode 4 now, and we have a touching moment of Frenchie trying to support Kimiko through her grief, only for the moment to become really weird when he tries to kiss her, his guilt and emotions clouding his judgment. Stormfront encourages people to protest at Vought Square in order to incite encouragement around the topic of supes in the military. and as Homelander becomes more agitated over her attention in the media, he flees to a remote cabin, where he has Doppelganger pretending to be Stillwell and encouraging his fantasy over her. As he rants to her, she encourages him that if the rest of the Seven aren't respecting him over Stormfront, then he should remove them and replace them with people that will. The mood is hilariously ruined when Doppelganger struggles to hold his shape, with Homelander's freakout being quite funny. Butcher meets Mallerie outside the wake being held for the apartment attack, and she asks him to investigate Liberty, a soup that disappeared and was a person of interest on Rayna's computer. She also tells him where to find Becca, and apologizes for failing him and turning him into who he is. Butcher then leaves the group to go find Becca, leaving MM in charge and asking him to investigate Liberty. In Vought Tower, Homelander confronts Annie in an elevator over working with Huey and threatens to kill her. But after she stands up for herself, claiming to hate Huey but refusing to become a murderer like him, he spares her, seeing that she's telling the truth. After a funny scene of Noir awkwardly asking one of the crime techs to help him find Butcher, we see Annie meet Huey to talk, and as he goes to meet up with MM, she breaks down, not being able to stay at Vought any longer. Huey asks MM to take Annie with them, both for their mental health and to ensure they have some muscle on their mission if they need it. And despite the fact that it's pointed out that they have tracking chips in them that can coordinate their every move, MM still decides to bring her along for some reason, despite this compromising both their mission and their safety should Vought decide to actually look into where she's going, which they should consider she's one of the Seven. Also, the cousin that Annie talks about to use as an excuse doesn't even appear, so they have no cover story to back them up should they be investigated later. In Vought Tower, A-Train learns that he is being fired and is going to be replaced by Shockwave, as his heart is too damaged to allow him to even compete in the top 20 speedsters, something Homelander views as embarrassing and refuses to allow on the Seven. We then have a nice scene of Huey and Annie singing together, while MM acts like an annoyed dad, before cutting to Butcher breaking into the Vought facility where Becca is, with a rope? Frenchie meets up with Cherie, and after having sex, they talk, coming to the conclusion he tried to kiss Kimiko to help her, and help himself feel less guilty for Mallory's grandchildren dying. Which is kind of weird, but then again Frenchie is a weird guy, so it doesn't strike me as odd that he processes grief differently. We then have a nice little scene of Annie and MM bonding together, reflecting on their dads and MM's OCD habits when an accident happens outside, and despite wanting to help, she is forced to drive away with the two of them. Overall, it's a nice scene, but the accident should have been choreographed a little bit better. The car just very slowly goes into the road for several seconds and there's no reason given as to why it does this or why the truck driver doesn't try and brake. It just full on collides with it. Butcher and Becca finally reunite, and we find out that the only reason Butcher was spared is because Becca threatened to kill herself in front of Ryan, something Homelander doesn't want to happen as it might jeopardize his relationship with him. Butcher wants to get her out but seemingly forgets about Ryan, with Becca refusing to leave him and returning home where they can formulate a plan. We have a funny scene of Huey not sleeping due to MM snoring, before having an emotional scene of Huey and Annie bonding over chocolate bars and their trauma, and the two end up sleeping together. We then cut to Becca and Butcher doing the same, with the two discussing how they've been since she had Ryan and forced to stay in the facility. On a talk show, Homelander and Maeve discuss the fallout of Compound V in a calm manner, but when pressed on why so many soups, and even the Seven, are white and straight, Homelander is quick to point out A-Train and Black Noir, and most importantly, publicly outs Maeve as part of the LGBT community, although he says she is a lesbian instead of bisexual. He also forces Maeve to reveal that she and Elena are back together as a couple. Overall, a decent, intense scene, especially as you don't know how Homelander is going to react. And it can also be used as a criticism of companies desperately pushing personal boundaries for the sake of diversity points, even if said individuals don't want to be used as an inclusivity tool. Despite what he just revealed to the news, Homelander is once again agitated that Stormfront is getting more publicity than him. As she continues speaking, Kimiko watches from the crowd, and as she's about to strike, Frenchie stops her, encouraging her to stop while Stormfront flies away, angering Kimiko in the process. Now, don't get me wrong, it's a nice scene and all, but the fact that Frenchie just appears from nowhere to stop her undercuts this a little bit, especially as in one moment he agrees with Cherie that he would leave her alone and let her grieve in peace, and then the next scene he's actively trying to stop her. MM drives to the house where Liberty is mentioned, but the woman in the house refuses to talk to him, assuming that they're Vought and that she's being silenced by them. In order to relate to her, MM tells the story of how his dad tried to sue Vought for an accident they caused, which led to him suffering so much stress fighting their lawyers that he ended up dying. The woman talks to them, telling them a story of how Liberty killed her brother for being black, and later their parents were visited by a lawyer of Vought, giving them a measly $2,000 for his death. She also tells them that Liberty isn't dead, but it's actually Stormfront. We then have a small scene with them in the car, where MM laments that what his dad did and what he does doesn't feel noble, and in fact feels like a disease, clearly hoping it doesn't make his daughter feel the way he felt as a child. After looking at memes and getting upset that his reputation is being upstaged, Homelander confronts Stormfront, and after a tense standoff, she gives him some tips to appeal to his fanbase, although he quickly denies he needs her help. Becca arrives to meet Butcher, but she refuses to leave the facility with him, believing that he will try and ditch Ryan at some point. He points out that they will always hunt for him, and that they can get away if they have him, but Becca refuses to allow Ryan to grow up without proper parenting and becoming the next Homelander. She states that Billy has always been anger prone and vengeful even before what Homelander did to her, and that she can't help him, with Billy forced to flee as the guards close in on him. Which brings me to the main criticism of these Butcher scenes. How the hell is this even possible? Vought created this highly secretive facility designed to monitor Ryan, who's basically Homelander 2.0, and Butcher somehow gets over this with a rope. No one apparently checks the CCTV cameras because he does it in front of them, and to top it off, none of the facial recognition software bothers to tell Vought HQ that Butcher is currently at their facility. All of this is very convenient, because if this secure facility bothered to have some actual fucking security, then Butcher would have been caught. He would have most likely been killed, and the rest of the show wouldn't happen, would it? As Annie and Huey arrive back home, she tells him that although she enjoyed their trip, they can't afford to be happy at the moment. We see that the Deep and the Church have been auditioning different people to be his wife, and Homelander arrives at the cabin and Doppelganger transforms into Homelander, telling him that he is loved by everyone. Homelander, enraged by the hard truth that he does crave attention from people, and that is his weakness, kills him. On to the next episode, we open on the set of the new Seven movie, where they focus purely on Maeve's sexuality in order to make a cringing inclusivity scene, as well as a slight dig at Joss Whedon what happened during his tenure on Justice League. Maeve is annoyed that Homelander keeps bringing her sexuality and Elena into the public eye, and Ashley shows a video of Homelander accidentally killing a innocent person because he was sloppy when fighting one of the soup terrorists. Ignoring the fact that this scene has a terrific joke.
So what, they're all starving, but one of them's got a fucking cell phone?
This is the final time anything to do with the soups and the military is really focused on. The main plot that the entire last season was building up to, the thing that Vought has been pushing for a season and a half to do and promote and capitalise on, is just brushed under the rug so we can focus on Homelander's desire to fucking Nazi and make memes online. Also, why would Homelander do this? Surely they must have had some sort of surveillance equipment watching this area. That's how they would know that this soup terrorist is here, right? So he would be aware that there are people watching him, but he chooses to act like this? Doesn't really make a lot of sense, considering we know that Homelander knows how to put on a performance. Anyways, Homelander is informed people are protesting him. He is down on ratings, and that Stan wants him to do nothing until he, the legal and PR departments come up with a strategy, with him becoming even more infuriated when Stormfront tries to help. Butcher, now hopeless of the situation, starts drinking and fighting to cope with the pain, and then he just starts shopping around a supermarket. Remember, he's still a national terrorist at this point, and Vought, Black Noir specifically, are looking for him on CCTV. So I find it a bit fucking unbelievable that he's got time to just casually stroll around a supermarket and none of Vaught's assets have managed to detain him yet. Also, he and Huey have a phone call where Huey doesn't blame him for leaving to find Becca, and Butcher says he was fond of Huey. But not only do I have no idea if these are supposed to be burner phones or not, considering you shouldn't even be using smartphones to do this shit, even if you destroy the SIM card, but Butcher says this line again.
You were always like my canary.
I know it's a bit difficult to understand because the show keeps skipping around and is quite vague about a timeline, but at the end of season 1 and the rest of season 2, that's only a few months apart at most, and the first season didn't take place over that long period of a time. So in the several months of time between the start of season 1 and this scene here, Butcher and Huey met, spent most of their time just trying to take down Vought, and only had a few personal conversations. Towards the final 2 episodes, Butcher started getting pissy at Huey for dating Annie. He then tells him that he would have left him to die if it meant hurting Homelander, and then abandons him with no resources or help after telling him he's a weak, pathetic person. Comes back a few months later, undermines everything Huey has been trying to do and establish while deliberately trying to make him feel useless, makes it clear that he would gladly kill him if it meant getting Becca back, and then they have that small scene at the end of episode 3, and then Butcher just left them again last episode. This whole canary allegory doesn't make any sense in the slightest, and I know that the acting and chemistry between the two make some good scenes, but these people are barely friends, never mind Huey being some sort of deep personal connection to him, and this might have worked later in season 3 after they had time to heal, but in this present moment it just comes across as bizarre and clunky. So Huey and MM both realise that something is wrong with Butcher. Billy visits his Aunt Judy, where we learn about his relationship with his parents before taking Terra, his pet bulldog, out for a stroll, contemplating whether the life he lived in the past few years had any point to it. He comes back from his walk and finds that the two have shown up at his aunt's house. Now, them finding where Butcher would go is something I'm okay with, but how did they get here so fast? All of Butcher's scenes take place around midday, so not a lot of time has passed, and you'd think that it would take several hours to get here at least. But no, these two have just shown up, conveniently meaning they can help right before Black Noir finds them. Speaking of which, Butcher manages to spot him because he just so happens to have his mirrors facing upwards in a way that would allow him to see onto the roofs of the houses around him, and he just so happens to look at the exact place and time when Black Noir is spying at them. Huey asks if they can just run for the car, and he's told that Black Noir would just kill them before they could get in, which begs the question, why wouldn't he have just killed Butcher when he first left the house and was getting in the car in the first place? MM decides to call in a gas leak, with fire crews swarming around the area to evacuate people. So either these fire crews were just around the corner, waiting for something bad to happen to this neighbourhood, or Black Noir just really sat up there for ages doing absolutely fuck all until the trucks arrived. Either way, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. They also don't bother trying to go with the crowd to be evacuated. I understand they're trying to not get caught, but they can always wear hats and sunglasses and shit to cover their faces better. But no, they decide to wait inside until the gas leak is called off and everyone goes back to their own business, allowing Noir to fight them in isolation at night. Butcher says he's going to go outside to fight Noir so the rest of them can make a run for it, basically committing suicide. Huey tells him that he doesn't just get to give up and that he needs to deal with it. Huey also says this:
"So you don't have shit. Welcome to the fucking club."
Which I find a bit fucking strange. This entire season seems to completely forget that Huey has an actual living dad that loves him and wants him to be safe, as well as Starlight. So this speech just comes across as very disjointed. The fire crews leave and then Noir starts to close in, and we get a funny joke when it turns out that Judy is actually a drug dealer and has a lab in her basement. As they wait for Noir, Judy tells Huey about Lenny, who had a similar personality to Huey and was the only person who could calm Butcher down once he got angry. Before she says what happened to Lenny, Noir starts to set off the traps and floods the basement with smoke grenades, forcing the group out. Despite doing this, Noir doesn't decide to head back to the stairs, the only exit that they have where he could have easily killed them, instead just appearing in a random part of the house. But here's the thing, Butcher also doesn't know where Noir is, and he then sends the rest of the group outside and then locks himself inside. Now obviously this is supposed to be Butcher drawing attention to himself, and sure enough the scene plays out that way. But surely Noir would be expecting them to try and run outside because that's where the car is. If anything, he should be outside waiting for them. And considering the amount of noise Huey makes, he most likely should have been able to kill them and then break in to finish Butcher off. But no, Noir wasn't outside waiting for them to make a run for it or trying to guard the car. He was just randomly in the house. And Butcher somehow knows for a fact that Noir isn't outside, which is good because otherwise he would have sent all of these people to be violently slaughtered. MM and Huey break back inside, and somehow these several pieces of piercing metal going at over 500 miles per hour don't do anything to Noir. But Billy slowly hitting him with a fire poker does. As Noir starts to advance on Huey, Butcher threatens to release photos of Ryan to the public, which would reveal what Homelander did to Becca and ruin Vort's reputation. Stan phones and calls Noir off and exchanging for these pictures to never be released online, which Butcher accepts. So, few things about this scene. How is any of Noir's equipment working? Never mind his cell phone of all things. His uniform has parts burnt off, his entire body is covered in nails and ball bearings, the only thing relatively intact is his helmet, and you're saying that not one of these things hit his phone or melted it? And secondly, what was the point of this scene then? Butcher wanted to die, but he didn't want anyone else to die either, right? All he had to do is tell the boys he has blackmail on Vort, go outside and then tell the same deal to Noir, but leaving himself out of it. This is a massive scandal Vort can't recover from, and they know he's been at their facility. If he said, "You can kill me but not them," then of course they would have taken that deal, meaning that Butcher stayed and fought for no reason other than the plot needed a reason to get him to stay around long enough to bond with Huey and MM again and then not want to die anymore. Thirdly, Butcher says the C word a lot, to the point where it gets really repetitive. In fact, throughout this whole season he says it a lot, but in this scene he says it about 6 times, and it just makes the dialogue come across as really tacky, and it just loses its impact. Anyways, Billy says goodbye to Judy and Tara, and the group head home. There's a few small plots going around this big one as well, with Frenchie following Kimiko, only to find that she's been slaughtering a bunch of Russian gangsters and that Sharia's been giving her hit contracts to perform. Frenchie is furious and asks Kimiko to stop, as killing won't make her feel better, only for Kimiko to reject him, feeling like losing her brother means she has no one. Frenchie, already annoyed by the situation and the fact that she won't teach him sign language so he can talk, just decides to leave her, with their relationship clearly very soured. We see the production of the new movie and the drama around it, such as A-Train being pissed off at his movie version being written out of the 7, cementing the fact that he is losing his position in the group. Stormfront gets involved in Annie's personal life, talking to her mother and dropping sly hints that she knows that it was her that leaked the Compound V, and Maeve and Elena getting lectured about how they should act with their gayness, pissing Maeve off and getting her to try and find a way to take Homelander down. Stormfront makes some racist remarks towards A-Train, Ashley threatens to fire him and degrade his dignity if he doesn't do the scenes, which he ends up doing. Victoria Newman is leading a protest outside Vought over the civilian Homelander accidentally killed, when Homelander arrives despite what Ashley told him. And it goes terribly, and after a morbidly comedic scene of him imagining himself lasering them all to death, he leaves and has a breakdown as people still hate him. He visits Stormfront and finds out that she's been making some memes to help rally his support, and he decides to investigate Stormfront and manages to access her emails, finding evidence about a place called Sage Grove. Stormfront arrives and they get in a standoff, with Stormfront threatening to tell people she leaked Compound V, while Annie threatens to tell everyone she used to be Liberty. Annie leaves as Homelander arrives, who sincerely thanks Stormfront for helping him regain some points. We see that the Deep has gotten married and he does a bunch of PSAs for the church. Not really much to say about that. Maeve later visits him and asks for dirt on Homelander in exchange for vouching for him to get back into the 7. The episode ends with Stormfront and Homelander having extremely violent rough sex, and it's about as graphic as you'd expect. Episode 6 now, and we open with a flashback of Frenchie with Cherie and a man named Jay, with the 3 close friends robbing banks together. In the present, Annie goes to the boys to have Frenchie remove her tracking chip, and Homelander and Stormfront have public sex after murdering a criminal, which I think is very dumb. Homelander would never risk his reputation this way, and no one else ever comes near this alley or listens to the man screaming his lungs off as his head is crushed. It's a very weird scene and is purely done just for the shock value. Butcher and Kimiko have a small moment of bonding over their hatred of Homelander and Stormfront. Annie finally sees where Huey has been living, and Kimiko hugs Annie in thanks for saving her after they were captured, which I thought was a nice touching moment. She informs the group about the Sage Grove Center, and Butcher wants to take her with them in case something goes wrong, with the two of them showing understandable animosity towards each other. Deep arrives and gives Maeve a camera from the wreckage, and seeing that A-Train is going through the same troubles he went through, Deep invites him to talk to the church. And the boys head off to Sage Grove, with Frenchie still guilting Kimiko over becoming a assassin for hire, and Annie getting annoyed about being left on the sideline in case someone might recognize her. And I mean, I don't know what else she was expecting. She's one of the 7. Of course they weren't going to send her in for an undercover mission. I don't know why she gets so annoyed to discover this. Also, somehow the group have uniforms to infiltrate this place, but presumably they would be very hard to get, considering that this is a top secret facility that they've only just learned about, and this seems to be their first time inside. So where did the uniforms come from? We cut back to the past when Frenchie is being arrested, and Mallerie comes to visit him, impressed by his ability to make weapons against Supes, and offers him a job working for her in exchange for the freedom of him, Cherie and Jay. As Frenchie, MM and Kimiko infiltrate the facility and discover that they are experimenting on people with Compound V, Annie and Butcher have a heated standoff over his hatred of her, comparing the way he sees Supes to how Homelander sees regular people. This argument simmers down when Stormfront arrives at the facility. Wow, Stormfront arrives on the exact day and time that the boys decide to infiltrate it. What a coincidence. The group spots Stormfront on the cameras, with MM comforting Kimiko as she has a panic attack. And after one of the patients refuses to comply, he's burnt alive by the nurse Stormfront brought with her, revealed to be Lamplighter, a former member of the 7. Frenchie wants him to die, but MM reminds him of his mission, and the group try and leave with the security tapes. Unfortunately, they pass Lamplighter on the way, who begins to attack them after recognizing Frenchie, busting open one of the cells by accident. There's then a weird interaction between the group and Cindy, the prisoner. Despite everyone standing off against him and Frenchie and Lamplighter even holding weapons against each other, Cindy seems to believe that they're together as they wear the same uniform. But at the same time, after dealing with a guard that attacks her, she doesn't bother to attack the group. She just watches them run away and then chooses to let the other prisoners out. Speaking of which, if she has the power to do this, why didn't she just do this at any other point on her own cell and escape whenever she wanted? Her door is exactly the same as all of these ones. She clearly doesn't want to be here but didn't bother trying to escape until right this moment. They reach the office and MM tries to convince Lamplighter that they need to work together to get out of the facility and the rampaging soups. He refuses at first but agrees when Kimiko saves his life. Also, I don't think this scene makes any sense. He has acid that's strong enough to dissolve people's skins created from inside himself and he can spew it on people. Yet when it touches his own skin it dissolves as well. Outside, the others begin to mobilize, only for one of the inmates to walk up to them. And despite trying to defuse the situation, the soup cannot control his powers, attacking them and causing Butcher to retaliate. As he and Annie check on Huey, they see a massive piece of metal has pierced his stomach, causing them to leave the others to find medical attention as the shockwave EMP'd Annie's powers and she can't cauterize the wound, as well as draining the van's battery, meaning they can't start it. I'm sorry, is this the best idea you could write to have these guys not assist the others escaping? You literally had a scene that said this.
It's lockdown. No one's getting out of here, not even her. There is genius at the front door, and there's no fucking way I am telling you or taking you with me.
And then not only do you contradict that here, having this guy just magically be outside, but he appears from the complete opposite direction of the facility, meaning that they don't notice him until he's up close and allowing his attack to injure Huey. On top of that, despite the massive amount of blood on his shirt, Huey is the one who notices this first. Are you serious? So Homelander, after waiting for a long time and not being able to find Stormfront at the meeting she said she'd be, tortures his trailer in a rage, and later rejects Stormfront when she checks on him, annoyed at her lying. As A-Train and Deep have dinner with Alistair, the church head, Deep reveals that he hates A-Train, and despite some hesitation, A-Train hears out Alistair when he says he can get him out of his predicament. Look, I'll talk about the Deep and the church stuff at the end, but it's just really boring really. MM gets the team to the infirmary, where Lamplighter taunts Frenchie over the death of Mallory's grandchildren. In a flashback, we see that the boys were blackmailing him to provide them intel on Vought and Homelander. And I mean, I get that it's a funny joke, but you're telling me that Lamplighter genuinely came across town in this secret meeting dressed up in this full getup with a flaming torch and didn't attract any suspicion whatsoever? Annie flags a car down and tells the driver to get out of the vehicle. As the driver investigates Butcher and refusing to hand over his vehicle, Annie blasts him, which kills the man. After cauterizing the wound, they begin to drive to the hospital. What was the point of doing any of this? Annie gets the vehicle to slow down, and despite, you know, being Annie, she is aggressive right off the bat, telling the guy to get out of his car. When the guy sees that Huey is injured, he then offers to drive them all to the hospital to get help, which they refuse. After they have their standoff and kill the guy, they then take his car and proceed to drive to the hospital, the place this guy just offered to drive them to. They kill the guy to drive to a place the guy was already going to drive them to, a public hospital as well, where they surely need ID and have surveillance cameras watching them, which is a bad thing considering they're wanted terrorists. The thing is, this scene could have worked if the guy just straight up refused to be helpful, or if Butcher was trying to take them to a off-the-book CIA warehouse or something, a place that this guy isn't allowed to see. But no, they made the guy very sympathetic and then they took Huey to a public hospital they shouldn't really be going to because they're wanted across the whole country. She then says that she didn't really feel any remorse over killing the guy and was more annoyed that he resisted, with her getting even more annoyed when Butcher gives her a look of respect for doing what she did. This plot doesn't really go anywhere after this episode, by the way. It's never brought up in the rest of this season or any of the others. I don't know why it's here. As Frenchie prepares to create some chemical weapons to help them, he questions why Lamplighter and the Seven never came after them for trying to blackmail them, and with what happened with Mallory's grandchildren, with Lamplighter revealing he didn't know the grandchildren were there and intended to kill Mallory. He then asks why Frenchie didn't stop him, as he'd seen him following him all night. In a flashback of that night, Jay overdosed on drugs and Frenchie left to go help him, and by the time he returned he lost track of Lamplighter. unable to prevent him from going after Mallerie and accidentally killing her grandchildren. This seems like bollocks, because not only does Shireen not bother to take him to the hospital or phone an ambulance, she doesn't try and do anything to help Jay recover. We don't see her doing any chest compressions, and she even leaves him lying on his back, which most people know you shouldn't do in case they vomit. Despite the fact that he should be dead by now, Frenchie manages to bring him back with what is presumably some sort of antitoxin or adrenaline and a couple of seconds of CPR before fucking off again. Lamplighter reveals that the facility isn't designed to make soups but to stabilize the compound V, so it can be safely used on adults, although he doesn't know why they're doing this. Frenchie reveals what happened to Jay and that he later died of another overdose, and MM asks him why he didn't tell anyone anything, as this was a subject that MM had used in the past as to why Frenchie is a bad teammate, and he would have forgiven him if he knew why Frenchie left that night. Frenchie believes he deserves to live with the guilt of what happened. After a humorous fight scene where MM gets attacked by Love Sausage, the team try and use Frenchie's bomb on Cindy, and when it doesn't work, Stormfront arrives to stop her, conveniently right before she was about to kill them. Lamplighter covers for the team, drawing Stormfront away from them and giving them the code to the door. And as they get Huey to a hospital, Annie and Butcher bond over their fondness for Huey. In Vought Tower, Elena comes across the video camera and sees the clip of the soups leaving the people to die on the plane. And while Maeve insists that she will use it to blackmail Homelander and they can be together, Elena is disgusted about how Maeve left those people to die. As MM is informed on Huey's situation, Frenchie apologizes to Kimiko about trying to use her to make himself feel better about his past actions, and Mallerie arrives to meet them, as Lamplighter has surrendered himself to them. She threatens to kill him, but Frenchie tells her not to as this would be a favour for him, with the group intending to use him against Vought. In Vought Tower, Stormfront wants to apologize to Homelander. She reveals the truth to him that she was born in Germany in 1919, where she was the wife of Frederick Vought and the first successful soup ever created, having a daughter that recently died. Going on a Nazi rhetoric inspired rant, she tells him that she loves him, being the perfect superhuman, and Homelander accepts her again. The episode ends with Cindy, having managed to escape the facility, hitchhiking away. 2 more episodes until this season is done, and we open with a bit of blunt, on-the-nose commentary watching a incel become radicalized by Stormfront and fucking memes until he kills someone in the dumbest way possible. You know, if you wanted to see if this guy is bulletproof, you could have shot him literally anywhere, right? If this was the show's attempts to portray growing racial hatred, they did a terrible job with it when you make the incel immediately jump from passiveness to full-blown murder. We cut to the boys at Mallory's compound, where Newman says that while Lamplighter is a good witness, they need more evidence to pursue Vought, with Frenchie and Kimiko providing security to Newman, Huey watching after Lamplighter, and MM, Mallerie and Butcher preparing to go on their own mission, until Butcher's mother phones him, wanting to see him as his father is dead. Annie has a heart-to-heart with her mother, believing that she was chosen from God only to discover that she was just a product and the way she lived was for nothing. It's revealed that her mother had accidentally told Vought where they were meeting and they proceed to ambush them, with Noir knocking her out and capturing her in Vought Tower. Lamplighter reflects to Huey that his dad was proud of him when he first used his powers, and he hates that he used to be one of the 7 and is now just nothing. Huey relates to him, stating how he didn't want to do nothing like his dad did, but now even as a member of the boys he feels useless. Honestly, this season is really just desperate to pretend his character arc in season 1 didn't happen. Homelander and Stormfront lead a rally condemning the shooting that happened in the opening, but insists that immigrants are still coming in and super terrorists are sneaking in with them. Homelander tells everyone that Starlight was a mole who helped to sabotage Vought and kill Translucent, and that she is now being captured, with Huey freaking out and asking Lamplighter for help, giving him a chance to be a hero again. Butcher arrives to see his mother only to find his dad still alive. He agrees to give him 2 minutes, with him accusing him of killing Lenny while he states he did everything to make them tough, remarking that Butcher is the toughest man because of him. When he accuses Butcher of leaving Lenny and causing him to die, Butcher nearly kills him before leaving. Stormfront reveals that she's keeping Starlight alive to have someone for the people to rally against, although Homelander is skeptical of the idea. When she sees a child and gets upset over the loss of her daughter, he brings her to see Ryan. As Maeve comes home, Elena reveals that she is haunted by what happened on the plane and what has happened in Maeve's life, not blaming her but needing time away. MM and Mallerie arrive to meet Vogelbaum, but he refuses to testify against Vought out of fear of his daughter's life. Mallerie encourages MM to stop fighting Vought and trying to get justice for his dad, as fighting them will consume his life and he will just lose his family in the process. Watching over Newman, Frenchie states the importance of talking about loved ones, as it helps to keep them alive a little bit longer even after they die, and Kimiko Kimiko finally agrees to teach him her sign language. At Alistair's party, A-Train gives Deep a gift to make up for all the shit he did to him. Animosity that never once happened on screen until Deep brought it up from nowhere, by the way, and they're informed that they might be getting back on the 7 due to what happened with Starlight. Lamplighter shows Huey a secret entrance into Vought.
Does not make it better.
Wait. You're telling me that literally anyone off the street could go up to this grate and all they'd have to do is just pull it open and you're in the headquarters of Vought Industries where you can do whatever you want? Yeah, there's some doors past this that need biometric scanners and passcodes, but you're still in the building and no one knows. Think of how much damage can be caused by using this entrance and it's just open for anyone to use. Lamplighter is still in the security records and is able to gain access to the elevators, and Ashley discovers that Elena and Maeve are no longer together, drawing a moment of sincerity out of her. As they see one of Ryan's Lego animations, Stormfront and Homelander realise just how cut off Ryan's childhood has been from the outside world, and Becca and Homelander argue, with Homelander believing that he's going to have the childhood he had from being isolated from the world, while she insists that everything would be too much for him at the moment, and that as Ryan has her, he will never grow up isolated. Butcher decides to visit Vogelbaum and ask him about Homelander, where it's revealed that Homelander used to be a lot like Ryan until Vogelbaum started to experiment on him to make him the world's strongest soup. After hearing that he doesn't really care about the pain Butcher experienced when Becca was hidden away, Butcher threatens to kill his entire family if he doesn't testify. Lamplighter leads Huey further into Vought Tower, but discovers that he led him into the conference room, not the holding cells. He reveals that he came here to kill himself in front of his statue, the one that was replaced by Starlight, making him feel even more of a failure. And believing that he couldn't make his dad proud, he kills himself. We'll get onto this decision later. Because of the fire setting the emergency systems off, Annie is able to draw power from the hazard lights and escape, while Huey cuts off Lamplighter's hand to access the doors. The hand should have been a hell of a lot more damage than this, considering his whole body was affected, but even if it doesn't char and blacken like the rest, his fingertip should be ashes by now. Huey getting his hand here and it's still functioning properly is just bollocks. After escaping, Annie gets to the elevators and decides to go to the conference room. For some reason. She's looking for her mother, which, as we find out later, is also in the prison cells. So why is she here? Is it because the writers were too lazy to come up with a fight scene that makes sense? Anyways, as she walks by, Black Noir appears and starts beating her, choking her to near death before Maeve saves her, using his allergy against him. Now, while I do enjoy that they use something other than brute force or blackmail to defeat one of the antagonists, as well as showing that even the strongest heroes can have mundane weaknesses, and a clever callback to this scene, how does Maeve get here? Noir is facing the door and the hole that he smashed into the wall, yet somehow Maeve managed to get in and go behind him without him noticing. Homelander tells Ryan about the outside world, causing him to resent his mother and departing with Homelander. Butcher meets with his mother again, who states that she just wanted him to see how little his father is and how much better he is. And I'm sorry, but this abuse story and the way it's portrayed genuinely pisses me off. As we'd see in the next season, this woman allowed her husband to beat her kids mercilessly, supported him every step of the way, let her own son be bullied into suicide, and then lied to her other son to trick him into seeing his dad again. And then she says that she knew he was a piece of shit all along, and Butcher and the show is supposed to view her as a sympathetic figure who is trying to help Butcher here? Fuck right off. The Vought hearing commences and Vogelbaum is called to the stand as a witness against Vought. And one small detail I love here is how fucking terrified Homelander looks, because he knows that Vogelbaum actually has the ability to completely destroy Vought. The killer that exploded Rayna's head in the first episode strikes again, killing off several people including Vogelbaum, Shockwave and other members of the audience. And with the hearing failed, the group wonder what they're gonna do next. One thing I do appreciate is that once you know the twist about the killer being Newman, in these scenes when she looks in a direction, that's the area where someone dies, which I think is a good bit of foreshadowing. I also find Homelander and the other soups' reactions pretty good, as even they are genuinely shocked and perplexed about what the fuck is going on. The final episode now, and after a PSA about supervillain attacks on schools, we see Mallerie and Newman talking to Secretary of Defense Robert Singer, who informs them that the President is ordering Compound V to be given to law enforcement and military personnel, and while he agrees that Vought were most likely behind the attack, he has no proof and cannot act unless they give him some. Now, for some reason Mallerie and Newman are annoyed at the idea of police and soldiers getting access to Compound V, but the key question is why? With Newman you could argue that she's playing both sides and pretending to be shocked, and I understand that giving Vought money isn't isn't high on Mallory's list of things she wants to do. But wouldn't having personnel that aren't under the thumb of Vought who have combat experience and are capable of standing up against Supes be a good thing? Why are you complaining? We also see that Becca has escaped the facility somehow. They mentioned a garbage truck that leaves the facility, and this was her initial idea that she tells Butcher off, but she clearly isn't in it here and was noticed so quickly that the guards are after her. Then again, this is a facility you can just break into by slinging a rope over the walls in full view of cameras, so maybe she just walked out the door. Actually, why are they following her? The whole reason behind this facility is to keep and observe Ryan, with her staying to provide a parental figure to him. Not only is Ryan not even here now, but Homelander is caring for him and Ryan is aware of the outside world. So why the hell would they care about hunting her down when she's basically useless to them, and she's not going to tell anyone, she would want to preserve Ryan's innocence. So why are they so keen to go after her? After Annie sends her mother away, she learns from Huey that the boys are planning to just fight the Supes. And we then get another annoying scene about Huey and his morality. He says they can't just kill the Supes, comparing the boys to supervillains if they do this.
So that's settled. We're just supervillains now, huh?
Huey, what the fuck are you talking about? They just tried to do this legally, and after all that build-up it failed. Noir is a loyal attack dog that will never join them. Stormfront is a racist Nazi that wants to genocide 3 of his teammates and their races, and Homelander will always be a threat in one way or another. A threat that shows no remorse or concern. Okay, maybe Supes like A-Train have some trauma they can recover from and be better people, but considering the situation, that's not really something they can afford to risk now, is it? So why do you act like killing them is the worst possible idea they could do? Homelander becomes worried about Stormfront's plans, as while he still wants to be praised as a hero by everyone, she wishes to make white people the superior race and wipe everyone else out, while Annie and Huey try to get Maeve to testify, with Maeve refusing to do so as she's tired of trying to take down Vought only for nothing to happen, becoming angry at Annie for not appreciating what she's done so far. Becca arrives to tell Butcher what happened, with Butcher setting out to try and find Ryan. Alistair and Stan have dinner, with Stan refusing to take A-Train back into the Seven, apparently needing Stormfront to help keep the company up, but he agrees that Deep can come back, and it's then revealed that A-Train was listening in to the whole conversation. As Ryan begins to miss Becca, Stormfront takes him to Planet Vought, although this backfires when she and Homelander care more about fan attention and Ryan is overwhelmed by the audience. Annie learns that Huey's mum isn't dead, but in fact abandoned him when he was 6, and one of the reasons he doesn't like abandoning people is he doesn't want to be like his mother. And then A-Train just appears in their car. I know he's a speedster and he can search areas really quickly, but how did he even know this would work? They're wanted criminals on the run, he wouldn't know they'd just be driving around New York of all places. And what happened to his heart problem? Before he could barely even search a small section of the sewers, but now he can search an entire city in only a few hours. He gives them the file the church has on Stormfront, allowing them to have leverage and him a chance to get back into the Seven. Butcher arranges a meeting with Stan, arguing that Ryan is their only possible contingency against Homelander and he's losing their hold over him. Stan acknowledges Stormfront's ideals, but she is good at hyping up people to get Compound V, which will make the company very profitable. Butcher is willing to rescue Ryan and get him ready for Vought to pick up in exchange for him leaving Becca with him, with Stan agreeing and praising him for his ruthlessness. Homelander struggles with Ryan, but after Stormfront encourages him, he opens up, relating how he used to be scared of crowds as a child as well, and that he'll learn his powers, and unlike himself, Ryan will have him to teach him. It's a nice scene, one of the rare bits of Homelander showing his raw self. The boys show Butcher Stormfront's file and agree to help him rescue Ryan. As the gang prepare and spread the file to news outlets, Kimiko is worried she'll freeze up when she sees Stormfront again, while Butcher asks Becca to stay behind, with her refusing and asking Butcher to promise her he'll get Ryan to her so he doesn't become like Homelander, which Butcher promises. We get a funny scene of Homelander trying to get Ryan to activate his powers, and then getting visibly uncomfortable by Stormfront's Nazi rhetoric, before she discovers her past has been leaked online. This causes her to leave the cabin, go to Vought Tower, and then look at the news. Why? The news could already be watched on her phone, or even the TV in the cabin as we see in the next scene. So why would she bother to go all the way to the Vought Tower when she can already see what people are saying about her here? The boys activate their distraction to remove Homelander, and after rescuing Ryan, Butcher confesses to the deal he made with Stan, one he can't follow because he doesn't want to hurt Becca, asking her to raise Ryan right and not become like him or Homelander. After Vought troops arrive at the cabin after having traced Butcher's phone, Homelander arrives back as well, killing them all when he discovers they're working with Butcher to get Ryan. Just what the fuck is this scene? For a start, Homelander is able to hear these speakers from miles away, but cannot hear the cars of the boys arguing in the field that seems to be right next to it. Then, despite knowing where the cabin is and that Homelander and Ryan are staying there, Stan doesn't find it suspicious that Butch is trying to call them from inside the same cabin he said he would be removing Ryan from. And why are these guys even here? Butcher said he would get Ryan away and then phone them to come get him. Why would they be anywhere near this cabin when this is the last place they should be expecting to pick him up from? As MM attempts to drive Becca and Ryan away, Stormfront appears and throws the vehicle off the road. I've got no idea how she knows that these are the boys. It's never established that she has super hearing, and you'd think she'd be more preoccupied with getting back to Homelander, but instead she sees a car driving in a field and correctly assumes this has to be them, conveniently setting up a final fight scene and foiling their plans at the last minute. Also, if you're going to show me a car crash like this, you can't then have MM just stumble out the car and be completely fine. Dude should be severely concussed at least. Stormfront then fights the group, with Starlight managing to blind her and then her and Kimiko start beating on her, only for them to get overpowered and taken down. Don't know why she wouldn't kill the boys here, they're right next to her lightning blasts, but whatever. The editing is also really janky. That tends to happen a lot with these fight scenes, but here it's especially egregious, lacking pretty much no shots longer than a second and cutting all over the place. I've also got no idea where MM disappears to. Butcher takes Becca away before this fight happens, and then the wreckage is right next to the shelter, but he just doesn't appear again until after it's been blown up. And another thing you have to research in order to understand this scene. If you just watch the show like a normal person, you'd think that Starlight could absorb all this energy being thrown at her. But apparently she can't, because this isn't electricity, this is purple plasma. I'm so glad that the writers definitely made this distinction clear in the show, and didn't post it in random articles after the season came out to explain some bad writing. And now, the cherry on top of the shit cake. After defeating all of them, Stormfront is approached from behind and sucker punched by Queen Maeve. The Queen Maeve that has no idea where they are, can't fly, doesn't have super speed, and was last seen in Vought Tower, miles away from here. You fuckers literally teleported her in just so the boys don't lose this fight. Wow, thank you writers for becoming the very thing you were trying to take the piss out of. So they kick her ass until she flies away, and after a brief glimpse of Homelander after killing the Vought soldiers, we see Stormfront arrive in the woods, somehow knowing exactly where Butcher was. As she approaches them, Becca stabs her in the eye, which Butcher doesn't see as he was thrown away before learning of this weakness. When his attempts to free her don't work, Ryan uses his heat vision on her. This causes Stormfront to have 3 of her limbs completely removed, her hair burnt out and burnt all over her body, and Becca to have a tiny cut on her neck with no other injuries whatsoever. How did this even happen? You'd think that she would be covered in burns as well, especially as her body is much weaker, but no, it's literally this small injury here and that's it. I don't know how he managed to hit her in the neck and then not immediately kill her, to be honest. Becca asks Butcher to not blame Ryan and then dies. Despite thinking about killing him, Butcher ultimately decides to defend him from Homelander, and as Homelander approaches them, he's stopped by Maeve, who forces him to let everyone go and stop interfering in their lives, or she'll release the video of the plane crash, meaning that no one will ever love him again. The attack on the hearing is blamed on Stormfront, the distribution of Compound V is placed on hold, and Starlight and the boys have their names cleared. Alistair knows A-Train stole the files, but as Stormfront was problematic for the church, and now that she isn't there to bother him in the 7, A-Train is allowed to rejoin the team. The Deep is outraged that he also isn't rejoining the team, leaving the church. Huey reveals that he's leaving the boys to stand up for himself and do his own thing. Butcher gives Ryan a necklace to remember Becca by before handing him over to Mallerie to keep safe. MM returns to his family, Kimiko and Frenchie go dancing, and Homelander whacks off on top of a building. Alistair and Newman talk about him releasing dirt he has on some of the other soups in exchange for not taxing the church, only for his head to explode after he threatens Stan Edgar, showing that Newman is the head exploding assassin. Huey then asks to join Newman's anti-soup department, as he doesn't fit in with the boys and what they do, and Newman decides to give him a job. And with this final scene, that is the end of The Boys Season 2. What a fucking mess that was. The season starts with the boys being wanted terrorists after the end of the last season, having to hide away with drug cartels and be super careful when out in the outside world. Yet by the halfway mark, everyone just walks around in broad daylight despite CCTV being able to track them through facial recognition. They use their smartphones without hesitation and are even able to walk around a Vought facility without a care in the world. Last season built up the importance of Vought having soups in the military, as not only does it allow them greater control in an opposing force, but also allows them legal jurisdiction in other countries that could allow them to expand their influence. Yet, not only do we barely see any of these missions or the possible goals Vought hopes to achieve, but by the midpoint of the season this aspect of the show is dropped entirely and never really reappears in the later seasons. The power inconsistencies are even worse than the previous season, with firearms doing nothing while slow moving melee weapons are capable of moving and even damaging soups. And the soup will be knocked unconscious from a small fall despite being able to walk along the Mariana Trench, while humans that are involved in severe crashes will just be up and running in only a few seconds when they should just be mush. The show still goes out of its way to make social commentary and parody big conglomerates, but not only is the right-wing criticism aspect that will plague the later seasons of the show beginning to appear, but the satire is more shallow and in your face compared to the previous season, coming across as more eye-rolling than clever. For some reason the writers decided to make these sex scenes very moralistic, something I didn't catch on my first watch of this season but was very obvious on a closer rewatch. There are several sexual scenes, but pretty much all of them are perpetrated by toxic people or their toxic relationships, with Butcher and Becca shown to be highly dysfunctional after their time apart. Frenchie is seen as self-destructive and emotionally stunted, and the soups are, well, soups. In fact, the only sex scenes that aren't shown in a negative light are the very vanilla, very bland ones between Huey and Annie, with the show having some sort of bizarre take that people who have fetishes or tastes are somehow more morally depraved than others. This is also when the gore and shock value is raised up for the sake of having something to look at instead of any narrative purpose. Things like Kimiko ripping someone's face off or Stormfront killing Kenji is fine because of how it's used in the context. But when you randomly have Homelander and Stormfront crushing someone's head while having sex in broad daylight in the middle of one of the most populated cities in the world, you can't tell me that this isn't done just for audiences to point at the screen and go, oh my god, look at that. The entire premise of the show is about killing soups, with the boys having to use what unorthodox methods and resources they have in order to take them down, with smarts and surprise attacks being the key to their survival. So how is pretty much every threat dealt with this season? Blackmail. They did it in the first season as well, but considering Huey had limited experience and the boys have only just gotten back together, I was fine with it. It's the safest card to keep things hushed up and they still kill the soups anyways. But this season is supposed to have ramped things up with more tension, but they still just use blackmail all the time. Annie needs to get some compound V? Blackmail. A-Train and Stormfront are threatening Annie? Well, she has dirt on them so they can't do shit. Black Noir is about to kill them all. Good job Butcher has blackmail then, isn't it? Homelander needs to be defeated and kept reined in. Look, this camera survived the plane crash and Maeve can just blackmail him. It all just gets kind of tedious. Vought are one of the most, if not the most powerful company on the planet, having their hands in every market, even illegal ones. They have a range of extraordinary soups under their control, the ability to influence the entire country with their news broadcasts, and access to public records and services, even having access to every CCTV camera in the country in order to help track specific targets for crime fighting. At the same time, their planning and critical thinking skills are completely fucking abysmal. They somehow struggle to identify people who are out and about in broad daylight, and their facility that houses one of their most important assets can be broken into by just using a fucking rope. There are several times throughout the show when characters will just appear faster than they have any right to, such as Annie finding the boys in the sewers despite there being a fucking speedster on the team. What makes this even more egregious is that while the first season was primarily set in New York, here some of the plot lines take them to other parts of the country hours away, and yet they all just teleport to the scene because they've been written to be there. Speaking of things being written that way, sometimes the writers will just do the stupidest things to justify certain events happening in a very specific manner. Butcher very explicitly wants to die but doesn't really want any of the others to, so he could just try and make a deal with Stan at any point, offering his life and his secrecy of the facility in exchange for letting the others go. But no, despite not wanting them to die, he still risks their lives anyways, as they could have been killed during this attack. This happens so the writers can basically add a filler episode and give the audience a tense scene. The same thing happens at the end. Stormfront is shown to be on the internet at all times, and Homelander's cabin is shown to have a working TV. Yet for some reason she decides to fly all the way to Vought Tower to watch the news she could have seen on both her phone and in the cabin, because if she didn't leave and she was still there after Homelander was distracted, they never would have been able to rescue Ryan, and so the final scene would have ended in failure. The show goes out of its way to take the piss out of corporate and celebrity culture, but it's also designed to add commentary around comic book and superhero culture, with one of the main criticisms throughout this season being the idea of girls get it done, a very clear criticism of the scene from Avengers Endgame where all of the female characters happen to be on screen at the same time during a big event, just so the writers can say, look at all these female characters doing stuff. Taking the piss out of this is something I should be applauding, and for most of the season you can say it did a good job. But when the reason your main protagonists win at the end is because you decide to teleport in a female character from nowhere to give them something to do, while at the same time unironically saying,
Girls do get it done.
all you've done is become the very thing you're taking the piss out of. Hey, remember Scientology? That thing that hasn't been relevant since South Park nuked it 15 years before this season happened? Well, the Church of the Collective is here, and most of the stuff revolving around it is completely irrelevant, with the final episode really being the only time it has any real relevance. And for the most part, it's just there to give the Deep something to do. So yeah, most of the plot points, themes, and world building for this are absolute nonsense. But surely the characters have plenty to offer to make up for it, right? For a start, the boys in the first few episodes are almost schizophrenic when it comes to how they act, especially towards Huey. Despite him being the one who saved them after Butcher left them to die, Huey is treated like a burden who doesn't contribute anything to the team and who needs constant supervision, thrown to the sidelines so they can swarm around and praise Butcher as soon as he makes a reappearance. And when Butcher shows he's just out for himself again and doesn't care about helping them that much, they still choose to follow him over Huey. And although they now have to constantly operate in secrecy and don't really have anyone to rely on, Season 1 showed how much damage Huey, Butcher, Frenchie, and a room full of stuff can do, with a little bit of help from Cherie. Here they have cartel connections and Kimiko on the team, and yet when it comes to taking the fight to Vought and getting their name cleared, from what I can tell they've just been sitting in the basement all this time just waiting for stuff to happen to them. They haven't even tried to talk to Rayna to get some sort of deal made. It's almost like they've been stuck in limbo until Butcher can come along and force them into a similar dynamic that Season 1 had. Huey has gone from being a much more rational and kinder version of Butcher to just being the same awkward, inexperienced mess that he was at the start of the show. And although he's working with Annie to try and get some dirt on Vought, she's the one who does most of the heavy lifting. After episode 3, he sort of got some respect from the team back, even though he shouldn't have had lost it in the first place, but any scene he's in when he's not with Annie basically makes him a prop to fill up space, with him being a soft spot for Annie and Butcher basically being his main role for the rest of the season. The only time he really does anything of significance after episode 3 is when he leaks Stormfront's church profile to the news outlet, and even then Annie could have done that herself, so I struggle to even count this as him being a productive character. Starts out as really getting onto Huey for situations and just being a angry, standoffish guy in general, and despite the first season establishing he really admires loyalty and family, having a heavy focus on respecting people, the fact that Huey risked his own freedom to save them is just brushed under the rug for some tension in the first few episodes. I could possibly bear with that because of the high stress of the situation if it wasn't for the fact that immediately after, Butcher gets back and he just starts to work with him without hesitation, showing no ill will towards the man who robbed him of his family and then left him to die, while continuing to show no care for the guy who actually risked everything to get him. And then episode 3 happens and his character progression just seems to go normal again. It's like a switch is flipped and he just starts praising Huey and sticks by him. He's shown to have some good heart-to-heart moments with the other boys throughout the season. We see a bit more of his backstory and OCD personality, and overall he feels like a solid character again. But as I said, the first 2 episodes he just switches up constantly, and it really just damaged how I saw him for the rest of the season. I actually really liked what they did with Frenchie and Kimiko this season. Throughout the first season we got hints of their pasts so that they didn't frame it in a positive light, and this season decided to run with that and use it to flesh them out more, which was especially needed for Kimiko because she was mostly just a plot device in the first season. Again, I was a bit annoyed in the first few episodes with Frenchie over his treatment of Huey, but compared to he's not as harsh or angry about it, and we've already seen in the past that Frenchie will try and do any idea if it helps, so him getting Butcher back at least makes sense. And Kimiko doesn't show any disrespect towards Huey either, with her smiling at him and him supporting her being really nice scenes. And I did like the conflict she has over the fact that even though Kenji is her brother, she can't support him and struggles with the fact he refuses to see the truth. After episode 3, I liked how the show handled the idea of their grief, that people will go on similar paths after loved ones die, and you can't always stop them from making your mistakes with just heartfelt words. Seeing Kimiko run from her problems and start killing just for the sake of it, only to see how much Frenchie is tormented by doing the exact same thing in the past, and his sharing his grief was a really satisfying moment, allowing for the both of them to start to heal and their bond to grow even stronger. Definitely one of the best character character arcs for this season. Butcher is a complicated one because it feels like he's being pulled in two different directions. In the first 2 and a bit episodes, it feels like they've continued with the character from season 1. He's very dominant, he doesn't really seem to care about the boys and their opinions, he just wants their help, and ultimately he feels like the selfish bastard from season 1 that would gladly let the people close to him be captured, injured, and even killed if it meant getting the slightest bit towards his goal. However, I guess the idea of Butcher being a completely unlikable asshole and the difficulties it would bring by the group refusing to work with him was something the writers just couldn't figure out how to do. And so he ends up becoming a lot more sympathetic towards the midpoint onwards, with this random bollocks about Huey being his canary and wanting to get Becca even if it means looking after Ryan, despite his solid stance on hating anything soup related. Annie was pretty well written for most of the season, being constantly at risk of dying trying to do the right thing, and despite her luxurious lifestyle, she's basically isolated and caged by Vought and Homelander, with her only moments of happiness being when she is with Huey. And even then, this is complicated by the fact they still have tension after everything that happened in season 1. But she deals with it, she is shown to be able to outsmart others and even stand up to Homelander, and she begins to deal with her feelings for Huey and working with the boys. I also liked how they handled the relationship with her and her mother, as she really wants to hate her for lying and making her question her entire religion and life, but at the end of the day she sees her remorse and decides to try and make things work again. But then there's the fact that episode 6 also happened and she just randomly became a cold-hearted idiot who handles this situation in the worst way possible. And when a man is threatened by 3 strangers trying to steal his car, he pulls a gun and she decides to hit him with a death blast immediately. She can control her blasts, she is bulletproof so she could have just taken the gun from him with no injury, and the guy was offering to take them to the place she wanted to go anyways. Yet she decided that killing him is the only option, and then expresses that she feels zero remorse for it afterwards. And I think the most annoying thing is this isn't even a start of darkness for her or anything like that. After this episode, no one gives a shit about what she did and she continues to behave the way she always has, like some inspirational moralistic Girl Scout. So this one moment really makes her character a disjointed mess. Rayna only gets one short appearance at the start of the season, but who she was and how she died is one of the driving points of the season. She's pretty much in character as how she was in season 1, and my only main complaint is that after season 1 the boys never seem to have bothered to come to her for help, but that's more of a problem to do with them, not her. It was also great to see Mallerie come back and help to flesh out the boys a bit more. She led them originally, but after Frenchie failed to protect her grandchildren, she felt lost and isolated herself, wallowing in grief. As things begin to escalate and with Rayna's death, she kinda takes charge in handling connections and finding out information for the group, feeling like a nice replacement for Rayna. But we also get a lot of personal moments from her, such as her regret for how her and Butcher's lives have turned out trying to fight Vought, as well as her anger towards Frenchie and Lamplighter. Again, I don't really have any issues with her this season. Cherie was also in the first season, but she was portrayed as just Frenchie's friend who helped him every now and then. Here we learn a bit more about why they know each other, we see that she helps him with the black market connections, and she helps to add some insight into the situation with Frenchie and Kimiko. Not a lot to talk about, but it's nice when little side characters keep showing up to help flesh out the protagonists. Newman is an interesting character simply because of the twist. At first she seems to just be a politician that wants to hold Vought accountable for their actions, creating a new department to handle that at the end of the season and hiring Huey to help her run it. But she's more of a complex character with the reveal that she is secretly working for Vought and Stan Edgar to help play both sides, as well as her being the head exploding assassin that remains a mystery throughout the season. I do really like her for the most part, but I generally don't understand how she managed to assassinate Rayna. I don't know how she tracked them down, I don't know how she managed to explode someone's head from so far away, and I don't understand why she wouldn't get rid of the boys here when they're just another loose end that needs tying up. Kenji was also a pretty interesting character. I like how he fleshed out Kimiko, and I thought his backstory was a nice addition. He was raised by extremists who insisted that they need to be harsh in order to defend themselves, and he hated them for it. Then one day something happened that made him sympathetic to them and fully aligned himself with their ideals. I thought this was a good way to show how people accept extremism. I think it was a bit of a shame that they decided to kill him off so the boys don't have any sort of moral quandary to deal with. It would be a pretty unique situation for the group to have this individual who also hates Vought and the Soups and won't hurt them because of Kimiko, but at the same time has no problem causing chaos in the US and acting like the very thing they struggle against. But unfortunately they killed him off, so we don't really get to see any of that potential played out. Becca and Ryan I do like for the most part. Ryan is a child and understandably gets emotional and struggles with his actions, not helped by having superpowers. So seeing him desperately wanting some sort of father figure and struggling to deal with his mother lying to him his whole life was a good avenue to go down. And Becca being someone who hates what happened to her but loves her son anyways was also nice, as well as the conflict it causes with Butcher. But the thing I don't understand is, why does any of this happen? Alright, so she didn't want to tell Billy what happened because apparently he's always had issues and this would have set him off the deep end. That's fine and understandable. But why not just get an abortion and hide it? Despite being scared of what he could do, she clearly still loved and wanted to be with him. So I genuinely don't understand why she would have kept this child in the first place. She could have been religious and didn't want to, or she could have consulted with Vought only to find out they can't abort it because the compound V infused fetus is too strong for them to remove. But there's never any real reason given why she had to have Ryan and go to the facility with Vought, which I think is very strange considering the entire conflict of Butcher and this season of the show is centered around this. So you think the writers would have explained it, but no, she just kept Ryan for some reason and that's that. Homelander is another mixed bag for me. On the one hand, we get some really sinister scenes from him. I really like how, despite his desire to remove weakness from himself, killing Stillwell didn't negate the fact that he's desperate to love and be loved, needing to feel like he has to give his child a better life than himself and be adored by him and his fans for it. And he is quick to try and use his position to gain power for himself and the Supes, something made clear in season 1. But on the other hand, this is also when the writers started to have him be inept at doing the most basic things, such as putting on a performance and using his powers. The Wind terrorist was attacking a village and clearly someone with surveillance equipment alerted him to what was going on, and yet instead of arriving and putting on a performance to make himself look good, he handles things in the laziest way possible and basically executes him instead of handling it properly. He was also shown as being capable of spinning failures to suit his agenda on the fly, yet here he struggles to do even that with some time to plan and prepare, relying on Stormfront to navigate how to talk to his fans. He is also shown to be able to move at speeds to catch up with an airliner, and even move a person engulfed in an explosion, but struggles to chase after the boys or react to a bus being thrown at him. I don't know, they seem to change his character from a narcissistic, emotionally unstable but cunning mastermind to someone who just kind of spirals from one situation to the other without really considering any of his actions, which I could excuse if the whole him going insane arc was something prevalent throughout this season, but it's mostly just hinted at the end of the final episode, before being built up properly in season 3. I guess he's just not as intimidating as he was in the previous season. Stormfront as a character I think is mostly done well, although there is one thing that really bothers me. She's kind of a reflection of Homelander, believing in the idea of a superior race, but while he believes this applies to Supes over humans, she believes it applies to whites over everything else, showing her Nazi and fascist ideology. Despite that, they do give her some emotional depth that allows her to not be a 2D villain, being heartbroken over outliving everyone she loves and wanting a new family in the form of Homelander and Ryan. The biggest issue I have with her comes in the idea of Stan Edgar running Vought. Vought is a company created by her husband, named after him, and everything it does is a reflection of his, and her, legacy. So why on earth would she, a white supremacist that believes her husband's work should be used to help create a world dedicated to Nazism, not be absolutely livid at the idea of a non-white guy being in charge? She blew up an apartment building full of black people because she happened to be in it, but she's got no response to her husband's legacy that she's fought so hard for being ideologically tainted. Just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Speaking of which, Stan is a really great foil to Homelander, being a regular human that has managed to amass the power to make Supes do what he wants even if they hate him, and capable of taking a company destroying scandal and turning it into a minor setback. But he's also shown to not be completely ruthless, capable of sparing his enemies as well as acknowledging the damage that his company has done. I think Vogelbaum got a decent send-off this season. Last season built up the idea that he was too ambitious and remorseless in his younger years and that he regrets turning Homelander into the thing he is now. And I thought it was a fitting end that he would die trying to take down the company he helped to create. A-Train is back, baby. But unfortunately his character feels a bit disjointed. Last season played up the idea that Compound V was making him more ruthless, and that underneath it all he was a broken person that needed help. And you would think that Annie and Huey showing him a kindness, as well as the fact that he can't run as fast anymore and so his dreams of being the top speedster are over, that it might be time to show a more human side to him. But no, actually, he's just as much of a dickhead in this season as he was in the last one, with blackmail and mutually beneficial goals being what keeps him from going after the boys. He also starts the season having constant heart problems, being completely winded from just a small run in the sewers. Yet in the final episode, he has apparently been running around the city for a little while trying to find Annie and Huey, making this plot point seem kind of redundant. Speaking of failed redemption arcs, I've got no fucking clue what the point of the Deep was this season. Last season seemed to imply that after everything he goes through, he finally understands the pain he's inflicted on people and is trying to punish himself for it. But then at the start of this season, it's more portrayed that he's still depressed and struggling to understand why he's being abandoned by Vought. Then he goes on a journey of self-acceptance, he tries to make things up and promises to try and do better for women, and after some pointless church scenes, he's shown getting married to someone and then only complains about them sexually, the thing he has been performing against for the past few episodes. And then by the end, he's basically his season 1 self again. I don't know why the show decided to throw this very obvious setup redemption arc in the bin. I don't know why they bothered to make his entire story revolve around parodying Scientology, especially when you could have just used A-Train for that. And to be honest, I don't even know why he's in this season. You could remove him from most of the season and nothing would change. An entire season, and the only meaningful thing he specifically does that would have a hard time rewriting is how he is the one who gathers evidence for Maeve to blackmail Homelander. That's it. That is the only thing he's explicitly needed for this season. Just what a waste. Black Noir is once again here, and unlike last season we get more than just 5 minutes of his presence, effortlessly killing off one of the soup terrorists and getting the boys terrified to the point where they basically blow up an entire house trying to stop him. I also really like how he's used to highlight the fact that even soups can have mundane weaknesses like nut allergies, but he's mostly just Stan's attack dog and gets very little personality, so he's more of a plot device than a character. I liked Maeve and Elena's arc, even if I think the social commentary was too on the nose and pretentious. Her having her personal secrets come out into the world and the whole world using that for profit is a pretty harrowing experience, especially when it tries to insist that you're something easier to define so they can make more money and branding on you. I also like how it deconstructs the idea that someone telling you about horrible things is a hell of a lot more different compared to actually seeing them for yourself. Maeve constantly tells Elena about the horrible things that soups have done, whether it be killing people, not saving people, or choosing to hide away in ignorance, and Elena is fine with it, insisting that it doesn't matter. And then she sees that Maeve left a plane full of people begging for their lives to die, and the sudden reality of the words hitting her. I thought it was a cool deconstruction of the whole "I don't care what you did in the past" trope. I also like that despite her cynicism, she still wants to be a hero, coming in at the end to help the boys get a win and stop Homelander, even if I hate the way they just teleported her in. Shockwave is there. I find it weird that they went through all this effort of establishing this rivalry with A-Train, the fact that A-Train's heart problems means he can't run as fast anymore, and setting him up as a new member of the Seven, only to kill him off with less than 5 minutes of screen time. His character just feels like a massive waste, and he's basically not even a character. I like Ashley in this season. She was kind of just an annoying PR girl in the first season, but seeing her put in a position where she simultaneously has more responsibility, whether it's managing these soups or their marketing, and also has less power as she becomes Homelander's lapdog, was a really interesting place to take her character. Especially the idea that she tries to be professional and businesslike to hide the fact that she's shitting herself every time Homelander is near her or something goes wrong. It's just a very darkly comical direction for her character. Alistair is a character who could have had a lot more potential, but unfortunately wasn't that fleshed out. He's basically just there to embody the traits that most people think of when it comes to Scientology, being a charming man who offers enlightenment, in exchange for complete control over them. Now, we find out later he was kind of working with Newman to get the Stormfront situation under control, so you'd think there could be a storyline leading into the next season, where the church is taking money from soups, getting the dirt on them, and then once they run out of money, the church sells them out to Newman and her department. And this could add another layer of depth to the idea that everything Huey has been fighting for is being a sham and realizing he needs to work with Butcher again. But no, he's just kind of killed off and the church is completely irrelevant again after this season. And the final main character, Lamplighter. I've got no real idea what they were trying to do with him. He was supposed to be a self-centered jerk who ultimately killed himself out of self-loathing over anything meaningful. But when Sean Ashmore portrayed the character, he gave a more nuanced and sympathetic performance, slightly changing the context and goals of the character to make him more sympathetic. So on the one hand, you have a man deeply haunted by his actions in the past, willing to hand himself over to Mallerie and even stand against Vought when demanded, wanting to live and be an eyewitness in the hearing and redeem himself. And yet we also have a guy who continued to viciously torture and experiment on people without remorse. He mocks the little kids that he killed and just sits around watching cuckold porn because he doesn't care about life anymore, killing himself out of the shame of disappointing his dad over anything he actually did wrong. So in the end, I've got no real idea what his character was supposed to be or how I should feel about him. Overall, season 2 of The Boys was a massive step down, not just in terms of the show itself, but when compared to media in general, being carried pretty much by the actors and the production design alone. There's so much about the writing that just feels rushed, whether it be the way the character just changes their thoughts and feelings from episode to episode, the nonsensical power scaling, most plots being tied up by blackmail, characters being teleported in for the sake of the story, the gore changing from something that tells you about the characters to just being used for shock value, and just some piss poor world building and set pieces that makes it a struggle to even feel invested in this world anymore. Thanks for watching, lads and lasses. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking, subscribing and checking out some of my other videos. Sharing always helps, and if you're feeling really generous, please consider my Patreon or YouTube membership. I also have a Twitter and occasionally I do live streams. But most of all, I just hope you had a great day and hopefully I will see you in the next video.